Hi, Steve. It's Mary Kay Diabaldo. I am so thrilled to meet you. I am the executive director at There Goes My Hero, which was instrumental, along with DKMS, in finding your match. So I was so happy when Burton told me, obviously your donor, that he went through this process and then you two met. So I hope I can get through this video chat without crying, because every time I meet with Burton, tears are shed and many Kleenexes are used.
That's awesome. It's nice to meet you too, Mary. And I know it's Zoom, but Burton, you're down there. You are my hero.
Oh, well, thank you. It was an honor to be able to participate in this.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be cool in these times when we're trying to do everything virtually to meet everybody and then ask a few questions so that it might be motivating to get people to donate their bone marrow, because we are now limited to virtual donations, which is hard because you don't get the personal touch and education. So again, thank you both for doing this. So let me get started. So Burton, first question's for you. How did you come about getting swabbed?
Yeah, so my journey started really at a There Goes My Hero bone marrow drive that was being held right outside of my apartment building at a food truck gathering. And I had known Eric, who's the founder of There Goes My Hero. And when I saw the booth, I did a swab and added my name to the registry. And that was now over 6 years ago. Added my name to the registry and really didn't think much about it until I got the call.
Wow. I didn't know, Burton, because when my family all did, to see if they could be donors.
Yeah.
The best kind of a donor is a related full match. They had to give blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I just did the very easy DNA swab that There Goes My Hero does drives like this all over the area. That's one of the things that really they're missing right now. The inability to sign people up. So I know, and Mary, maybe you could speak to this at some point, but the ability to do things virtually, get a kit sent to you and do the swab that way, because drives were a big part of how they get people like me to match with people like you, Steve.
That's cool. You know, what's interesting is from what you're describing, it doesn't sound like it's invasive, even like the COVID swab, which, supposedly is very uncomfortable. This is just inside your mouth?
Yeah, super easy. So it literally looks like a Q-tip, and you swab inside your mouth about a minute each swab. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mary. And that was it. They put it in an envelope, they ship it off, and I really didn't think much about it from there.
It's crazy that 6+ years ago, you were swabbing the inside of your mouth, right? And then somehow the stars line up, and I'm alive today, literally, because 6+ years ago. Think about that. That's just crazy.
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, and it's what Mary does and what There Goes My Hero does to connect people and do things like this. Seeing the two of us on here really brings it all home in an amazing way.
Yeah, cool. I have chills. So, Steve,
put on a sweater.
I know. So, what was your exact date of diagnosis, and what was going through your mind?
So July 9th, 2018, so we're coming up on 2 years, I had a cough that kind of wouldn't go away, and I went to see my primary care physician, and his office is in a building that also houses a hospital. And so I just went to see him, and he said, I think you have pneumonia, but I'm not sure. We need to run some tests. And, you know, by the time I schedule those, it's going to be a couple of days, you know, take an x-ray. But the hospital's just, I mean, literally, you can just walk down the hall and let me call over there, just send you over there, and they'll just see you right now. We can figure it out. And so they did. And I happen to know the head of the ER doc. I mean, just so happens like she was a youth group member when I was a youth group leader. I mean, so Eliana was there, and they came and snapped a picture of me, x-ray wise. And I said to the guy, are you just the tech, or are you going to read that? He goes, no, I'm just the tech, but you have a really bad case of pneumonia. So I don't know, 20 minutes later, the doctor comes in and says, you have pneumonia and I need to give you some antibiotics, send you home, you'll be better in a week or two. Or if you've got the time, we can check you in to the hospital here, inpatient. I can give you the antibiotics by IV and it will get you better faster. And so my wife is there at this point, and I'm thinking, what do I got with work? Yeah, I can, you know, hold up for a day or two. And so she goes, okay, great. You know, give me a couple of hours just to get you a bed. You know, I can't just magically just take you up there. And about 45 minutes later, she comes in, shuts the door. Sandy, my wife, knew something was up. I didn't. And she said, so Steve, we got back your initial lab results. Your white blood cells are weird. And I said, well, I'm weird, so that makes sense. And she goes, no, we only see this with people that have leukemia. And what? And she said, let's get you upstairs and we'll know in 2 days actually what's going on. We'll get back the results. And so 2 days later, a doctor came into my hospital room. I never saw him before, never saw him since. May have been a hematologist, I'm not sure. But he says, you have acute myeloid leukemia with several genetic mutations, and we're going to get you to KU Med Center, which is the hospital that I had a lot of my treatment at, and you're starting chemo like tomorrow. I didn't know what acute myeloid leukemia was, AML, but that's how the journey started.
Wow. I mean, that's when you really know and feel the phrase, life can change, you know, in a minute.
Yeah, and at that point, I'm kind of shocky, you know, and it is surreal at that point. Life, you know, what? I mean, I'm going to take a left turn, like the hardest left turn ever, but you don't really know what's ahead of you. It's just, literally, I'm putting one foot in front of the next, but mostly the team, these medical doctors, they're just, you know, they're not going to tell me the whole story. I didn't even know the word transplant. I didn't know transplant was ever going to be in the picture. It's just, we're describing this chemo and this chemo and this chemo that you're going to get starting today. And they didn't even tell me that there's another one coming 7 days down the road. It's just very focused on what you need to know, Steve, right now. What are your percentages? Actually, so strange. And I know I told you, Burton, this before. I never Googled AML or acute myeloid leukemia with these genetic factors. I actually didn't know how horrific the cancer was and how close to dying I was. I just kept this attitude and
ignorance is bliss, I suppose, in this case.
Yeah.
Burton, you sort of have a similar thing that you told us about when you Googled bone marrow transplant and you shut your laptop because you decided you didn't want to know anymore.
Yeah, I made that mistake about a week and a half after I had already done it. I was curious what I had just gone through, because same thing, Steve, it's funny you say that, because I didn't look into what the procedure was or anything like that, because it was what I was doing, you know. So I didn't want to know what the needle looked like or whatever the procedure was, because I knew I was going to do it and I was going to be out for it, so it didn't matter. And about 2 weeks later, as I'm fully recovered and feeling great, I gave it a Google and I said, okay. And I literally just shut my laptop. I was like, I'm not going to watch that.
So Steve, how long was it before you heard the term bone marrow transplant?
So I think first part of August, quite soon, they said, within the first week or two of treatment, they said, the goal is to get you into remission. And remission for AML, for acute myeloid leukemia, is getting the percentage of leukemia cells in my body to be 5% or less. I still have leukemia at that point, and it'll come raging back. But if you can get it to 5% or less, then they said, okay, and then you're going to have a bone marrow transplant. And I had no idea really at that point what that meant, what was involved. I just knew that it was something that I needed. It was a goal.
Right.
Want to get to that transplant. That's our goal. But I didn't know anything about it at that point. And quite early on, so they did this whole genetic test on me as well to find these abnormalities. Quite early on, I'd say mid-August, they said, the registries, I don't know if it's true, 27 million people or whatever are on it, and we have found you a perfect match. Now, it's an unrelated match, so we'd really like to find a related perfect match, so let's get everybody in your family tested. I really didn't know how cool it was to have a perfect match. I learned that later working with MD Anderson, how quite remarkable it is. And I don't think, Burton, you've ever seen it, and I'll try to send it to you sometime, is they give you these sheets of paper that have all these crazy lines and numbers, and somebody that's a scientist come up with this whole thing. But you can see, like, between me and my brother, we matched 5 times, but we didn't match here. But
oh, wow. I'd love to see that.
My numbers, they are just, there's Steve, there's this guy, I don't know him, 32-year-old male, that's all. And there's the next one, and there's the next one, and there's the next one. And
amazing.
And these are like down to DNA level stuff. So it was, that's the guy. And then we just had that in our back pocket. We knew that, there was this guy, and we were just hoping that I would ever get there.
And that was right around that time was when I got my first notification that I had matched.
Okay.
And they basically said, we have a match. He has to get ready for a potential donation. And then they put it on pause for a little bit.
Right.
Because I think, go ahead, Mary.
So Burton,
yeah.
Before you got that call, and I'm assuming they called you on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. Had you thought about the registry after that? So you're at a food truck rally, you swap.
The extent of me thinking about it was when I would occasionally run into Eric.
Okay.
But quite frankly, I really, it didn't show up on my radar as something that I had even enrolled in until I got the call.
Steve, so Eric is our founder of the organization.
Right.
He's the survivor founder of Hero. So you never thought anything of it until you ran into Eric. And
I would see Eric and just sort of think, I wonder if I'll match one day, or, it was very, very casual. The last thing on my mind was that I'd be, well, certainly not sitting on a Zoom during these times, but that I'd be sitting across from the person that I was able to donate to. It didn't even enter my frame of reference.
Okay, so in August sometime of 2018, you get this call. Yeah. What are you thinking when you get the call?
I remember I very quickly, I think I texted my wife and sort of said, hey, I got this call. We should talk about what is involved with this, but I think it's something that I want to do and should do. And to her credit, she was like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you do it? She didn't even hesitate. If there was a fraction of hesitation for me, she pushed me over the edge in no time, as she often does, to have me do the right thing. And, it's just, was very surreal in that moment because there wasn't a face to it. The conversations we've had, Steve, it makes it very real, and it's just such a cool thing. Like you said, looking at our DNA side by side, you know, we were strangers before this, but now I feel like I've known you forever, which is very strange.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Steve, when you found out you had 100% match, what did you think? Because I assume at that point they had ruled your close family members out, that you weren't.
They first told me that I had this perfect match, and then we found out that I didn't have, that no one in my family was a perfect match. But there was some debate over whether a half match related donor was better than a full matched unrelated donor. By the way, I think you're called a MUD.
Seems about right.
Yeah, matched unrelated donor. But you know, they also talked about my own cells. They also talked about umbilical cord cells. So I didn't fully understand. Again, I'm in the middle of fighting the leukemia. I just know that this is this goal, and it's cool that I have this thing in my back pocket, but I'm not close yet to figuring all that out and worrying about that. But it was very comforting to know, oh, okay, if we can get there, you know, he can always back out. They told us that, and he may be sick and all that. But it was kind of always, okay, I just need to get there, and then we can do part 2.
Okay, so now we're fast forwarding, and it's, I believe, January 29th, Burton? Was that your date?
28th or 29th?
28th.
28th, yeah.
Okay. And so what did you have to do prior, and then what did the day look like for you?
Is that question for me?
Yes.
Sure. So prior to the date, I did a few things. I went to the hospital where I donated for a full physical, where they make sure first and foremost that I was healthy enough and in good shape to be able to do the procedure. That was the first step. And once I passed that, I then went back to the same hospital, I would say a few weeks later, once we knew we were going to be moving forward with the donation. Had another exam, and then I went and gave blood to myself, essentially. So they collected 2 bags of blood from me for the day of the procedure, should they need to put any blood back or for whatever reason. And so I did that, and then got prepared for the day where my wife and I went to the area where we were donating. The night before, we went out to dinner with friends and just sort of talked about what a amazing opportunity I had tomorrow in that moment. And then the morning came, and that was the procedure.
Okay. And Steve, what was it like on your end? So they basically told you, you don't have a familiar match, and this is the way we're going to go.
Right.
So how were you, had you exited the hospital at this point? Were you at home?
Well, my first hospital stay was about 50 days, and then went down to MD Anderson for a consult, came back up to Kansas City for a clinical trial, went back to MD Anderson for a different clinical trial. So up till that point of MD Anderson's clinical trial, 13 different rounds of chemo, none of which worked. So, and we're kind of running out of options at this point. And I'm pretty beat up at this point, not from the leukemia, but from the meds. And October, November, we're down in Houston at MD Anderson. And I get on a clinical trial for 2 drugs, Dacogen and venetoclax. I won't bore you with how they work, but some brilliant PhD doctor, somebody figured these drugs out. one of which I think is the one that kind of worked, but it's hard to know which one did, but one of which goes down into the DNA double helix cloud and pulls a protein off of these leukemia cells that is otherwise prohibiting it from going through this process called apoptosis, which is self-destruction. It pulls off that protein and then the leukemia can self-destruct. So I'm 13 chemos into this. It finally works and I get into remission, which is, I was 2% leukemia cells after these drugs, eventually come back to Kansas City and just get ready for the transplant. So two things have to happen. One is my counts need to recover. So in the course of all the chemo, they're trying to kill the leukemia cells, but they also kill all your cells.
Right.
And so eventually those cells come back. The bone marrow factory starts producing cells. And in my case, when it came back up for the first time, is only producing a very small amount of leukemia. Of course, that'll grow and grow and grow if I don't do something about it. So I know I've told Burton this before, but Mary, they were talking, once my counts recovered, we're in January, so we've got to reconnect with your donor now, and he could have the flu. By the way, I don't know where in the world he is.
Okay.
He could be anywhere in the world. We thought they let it slip one time that he was in the United States, so we thought it was domestic, but we didn't know. So think in terms of a couple of months. It's going to be a couple of months by the time we can get a hold of him. Hopefully he'll still want to do it. He's in good health. And that's a meeting we have with the doctors. And the next day, so they must have called you, Burton.
Yeah.
They call and say, your guy wants to go right now. And
great.
so, okay, well, our bags are packed. And we went to the hospital. I was in the hospital for 10 days before the actual transplant. So first couple of days is just kind of, it's cool. We just kind of get fluids in you and get you settled here. It is happens to be Unit 41 at KU Med Center, and it is a sterile environment. So to get to this unit, you have to go to an airlock chamber, and then everything gets washed and sterilized. And only when that's done on closed circuit TV does the door open up into the unit. So it's a different kind of experience. And then they start giving me chemo. So they had a choice of 2 different regimens of chemo to give me to get ready for the transplant. One is for people my age, because it's a little gentler. They're both pretty powerful, but, and the other protocol is a nuclear bomb. They give you, it just wipes out your entire cellular system. And because I still had that small amount of leukemia in me, and because my leukemia had been so resistant up to that point in time with all the chemos, the doctor said, we think you can stand the nuclear bomb. We want to do that. And so they gave it to me, and they give it to you, and you kind of still feel okay. You're kind of doing okay all the way through the 28th. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but I can tell you about that moment. But that's the prep to get ready, is they clear all the cells out of your body. And it's major strong stuff. I'd say 2 or 3 days after the transplant, and we can get back to talk to you about that moment, like you got hit by a Mack truck. Yeah. And you can't crawl, you can't walk, you can't do anything.
And did they choose to do the bone marrow direct instead of the stem cell transplant because you were so sick?
The bone marrow direct instead of the stem cell. Well, I don't know the proper term, but I think I got a bone marrow stem cell transplant. It wasn't
marrow. Right, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, Burton had the surgery as opposed to just doing the
Peripheral blood.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. So all along they say it's up to the donor. By the way, this whole process and part of what people should know is they were always as concerned about my donor, who I didn't know, as they were about me, even though I'm the one that's, on death's door.
Yeah.
Everything was, well, we have to ask the donor, and it's up to the donor. And even if you want to talk to your donor, if your donor doesn't want to talk to you or know who you are, I mean, it was very protective of Burton, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they always said it would be really neat if your donor would elect to do the surgery, which is just, I understand, general anesthesia, and then they take it out of your bone marrow from your hips, as opposed to peripheral blood. So peripheral blood is, I gave blood, you know how many times you did it, but I had hundreds of transfusions, and I'm still doing that till today. But they would take the blood out of your arm, which is just an IV, and then they centrifuge it and they deal with it. Or if you're really lucky, your donor will want to go under and then do, what is a bone marrow biopsy. I've had 15 of those, but the donors is more involved in that because they're pulling out more stem cells than they do when I get a bone marrow transplant for diagnosis. So we were just hoping that the donor wanted to do the whole thing. As a matter of fact, leading up to, you must have told them, Burton, because they said, oh, your donor wants to do the real deal. And yeah, okay, that's great.
Well, what's interesting is they didn't actually give me a choice. What they told me, that's what you needed. So on my end, I was told that's what you needed, and that would be the best thing for you. So that's what we did. It was really that, on my end, it was that simple.
I'm sure if you would have said, is there another way we can do it, would have said, sure.
Yeah, I guess. But I was all in for you, Steve. You know that.
I told my doctors that story, and they all laughed, and they said, well, we should have given them a choice. But...
Hey, all is well that ends well after all, right?
So,
exactly.
Burton, now we're going to go to the day of. So you go to the hospital the morning of, and what happens?
Yeah, so I checked into the hospital. It was very early. I think it was about 7 a.m. And my last memory is they give you that little cocktail, they call it. I think they called it happy hour. Right before you're all scrubbed up, and they wheel you into the OR and give me a little cocktail before I go out. And then I came to. I was looking at my beautiful wife, and it was done. And from there, it was all about being able to stand up without getting lightheaded, because they do take a fair amount of blood during the procedure. Again, one of the reasons why I donated previous was they could put back any blood that was lost during the procedure. And literally, I checked out the next day. So I stayed overnight and was able to just be observed and watched. And they were really looking to make sure my iron count and some of the essential things associated with the procedure were building back up so that they could let me loose. And then from there, I came home, and the procedure was a Monday, and I worked from home Wednesday, Thursday, and then I was back in my office that Friday working. Now, I'm fortunate I have a desk job where I was sitting at my desk, and really recovery was very easy. A lot of people shy away from the procedure, and we were joking that I didn't know I had the option to not do the surgery. But the reality is, if that's what you needed, the recovery was very manageable. I've described it as like if you worked out your legs for the first time in several months, and that soreness, sort of your lower back, sore pain. But when I think about what you were going through, Stephen, now hearing you talk about what you're going through, for me, it paled in comparison. And it was like, you know, it's like having an itch and being upset about that relative to what you were going through.
Yeah.
Okay, and so Steve, describe the day of when you knew you were getting this transplant.
Okay. So the day of the transplant was January 28th, 2019, my new birthday. I have 2 birthdays now. So they said it was scheduled around 5 or 6 p.m. by the time that the donor gave the stem cells in the morning, and then they could fly them to Kansas City, bring them to the hospital, get them in the lab because they do a bunch of stuff to them first. And then they eventually test them. You don't actually find out the test results till a week later. And then they ultimately bring them in the room. We had a class, and they kept saying that, at least physically, it's very anticlimactic, this transplant. And physically, they're absolutely right about that. So at this point, I used to have a PICC line here in my arm, and I had that for months. But then when you get ready, especially for transplant, but for going on like a month before that, I had a trifusion line in my chest. It's always there. And I would get blood transfusions and medicine and all sorts of stuff through that trifusion line. Trifusion, just there's 3 ports. So I knew how it was going to go down. They just literally bring in this bag. It looks like all the other blood transfusions, except it's a little redder. It's kind of pinkish red than blood transfusions. And literally they hang it like the other ones and put it into my chest like I'm getting any other, you know, this one was maybe an hour and 15 minutes. So, I mean, I've just had so many of these. It's not like da, da, da.
Yeah.
What is crazy about it, I think, though, is that you would think they're going to put it in my bone marrow, right? I mean, they'll put the cells into my bone, into the marrow part, but they don't. They just put it here, and those cells know where to go. They
Amazing.
into my body like with everything else I'm taking, but they know to go to the bone marrow and hopefully, you know, get in there and engraft is the name of it and become my cells. So it may have been physically anticlimactic, but emotionally it wasn't. I mean, I was holding this bag of cells that was going to save my life. And it's a little touch and go because at this point, they had killed all my cells. Now, it takes a couple of days for them all to die off. Hence, the 2 or 3 days after transplant is when I, you know, felt so bad. But it's like, yay, hooray. But if these don't work, I'm not going to be around next week. So, you know, you're hoping everything's going to go down, but it was pretty emotional for me. And Bert and I sent you that video.
That video is incredible.
Yeah.
Of that moment. I will cherish that forever.
You can see the cells, the red stuff go down the tube, and then it goes into me. And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
So were you aware that Burton was in the hospital and what time and all that? Like, did you know what he was?
No, we only knew that he wasn't going to do peripheral blood. He was going to take it out of his bone marrow. And at this point, we thought he was in the United States, but again, weren't sure. And it was just that it was in the morning. I don't know how early, so that plane flight, everything to me would be around 6 p.m. And
so
then
did you get
updating
updates? You
Yes.
do get updates. Okay.
Yes, they're on the plane. They've landed in Kansas City. They're downstairs at the hospital. They're in the lab. Let's think about an hour and a half, about 15 minutes from now. And then the gal walks in. She walks in with them.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, we took a picture, my wife and I. Yeah.
So Burton, you don't know anything about your donor. I remember that.
Yeah, all I knew was 61-year-old male. And I think I knew domestic actually at that point. Well, actually, no, now that I'm thinking about it, no, it could have been anywhere in the world also, similar to you, Steve. All I knew was 61-year-old male at that time.
Yep.
Now, I know, because I met you after this happened, after your donation. You had quite a spiritual journey and you were preparing for that. Like, if you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. I mean, Steve, it may not have taken. So talk about that and how you prepared for that.
Sure. I mean, ultimately for me, I knew what the right thing to do was in that moment. And I think I really tried to focus on that. And for me, having the opportunity to donate, that was the right thing in the moment. Whether or not it was going to be successful or not, I really credit a lot of the doctors that were involved with my process of the donation of really tempering expectation. There was a chance I wouldn't even get to meet you, Steve. Again, similar situation. If you weren't comfortable with an introduction or speaking with me, then, so I had to prepare for that potential as well. So not only do you think about, is this going to work, but you think, well, would this person want to communicate? Will they want to be friends? Like, what does this look like moving forward? Let's make this a success. And then secondly, well, what does this look like? Because, and Mary, you alluded to it, it really changed me as a person going through this experience, because it was an opportunity for me to in a very unique way, to just literally give of myself to a complete stranger. And going through that experience really, it changed me in that it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done with my life. And meeting you, Steve, and this is our second Zoom call since the quarantine has begun. But really just brings it home of what it means to give to others and to have the opportunity to do that for you, Steve. And then for us to use our collective experience to try to inspire other people to do the same, because it's been so rewarding for me. And really, I'm grateful to you, Steve. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I'm grateful to you, Steve, for having had the opportunity to do this for you.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
So, and once you have the transplant and you're getting healthy.
Yes.
Like, how are you feeling through this whole thing? Did you want to meet Burton? Like, what was your feeling? And I'm sure you were also tempering your expectations, like he said himself.
I remember one of my doctors, Layla Shunay, said to me, they can know more about you than I can certainly know. And I think word gets passed from transplant coordinator to transplant coordinator. And so they had already told me that you were like gung-ho for this whole deal, and we're going to do it, the way that would help me the most, which is from, and they talked about, someday you might be able to meet your donor. Your donor will want to meet you. I'll guarantee you. But I think they do the right thing, and I assume this is universal, I don't know, but they told me that nothing could happen for the first 365 days.
Yes.
That it would be January.
Same on my end.
Yeah, January 28, 2020, before I could even reach out, and this is how that would look. And I think in large part because how it looks post-transplant. So the first 100 days post-transplant, I have to be watched 24/7. If any one of 20 things happens, I have to be at the hospital within 30 minutes. I mean, I have no immune system at this point, and I could die from a cold. I mean, literally, that's where you're at. And, they give you numbers. I don't know if we believe the numbers exactly, if they're right, but 1 out of 4 people that did exactly what I did don't last those first 100 days. So, 75%, 3 out of 4 do. So, but still, it's okay. It's heavy stuff. But I kind of had this thought, my donor's going to come through. These are like the greatest cells in the world. I think I told Burton about you before. So one of my doctors came in and he says, so tomorrow, this is a week after transplant, tomorrow we're going to get the lab results. And I go, what we need? He goes, well, we haven't, again, they don't tell you stuff till you need to know it. So there's no reason for me to know this before. But he says, so this is a bag of cells. And they're all great. We want all these cells. But what we really want is the cells called CD34. Those are the magic ones. That's what you want to have. And literally, the reason that they took a sample down in the lab is so that they could test to see how many CD34 cells there were. And he said, first of all, you got a pretty good bag of them. I mean, it was way on the large size of bags.
Well, Steve, you should know they ended up taking about 30% of my blood, they told me.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's a bag about like this. I mean, you saw it maybe in the picture, kind of, but I can send you another picture when, of just the bag. So he says, we'd love it if there were 2 million of these CD34 cells in your bag. But tomorrow we're going to get the results. But, and I'm thinking, he's going to come in. And so Brian comes in, Dr. McClune comes in the next day. And he's not telling me. He's not coming out with the words. And so I go, hello, what's the story? How many cells? 6 million. So
wow.
I was this is going to work. This is going to work.
That's awesome.
So that's how I felt afterwards. I was, I'll send it to you, Burton, but I gave updates to friends and family every once in a while through this whole journey. And that was a short update. I gave many long updates and pictures, but this happened to be a picture. And I said, this is a short update. I remember saying that is the top of the, this is a short update. And I just had the bag and maybe I had a heart stone, which is a kind of crystal kind of stone. And I go, this is what it looks like when a 32-year-old person that I don't know and doesn't know me decided he wanted to save my life. This is what it looks like. And that was the whole.
That's awesome.
And I just believed it. I just thought it was going to work.
That's awesome.
Did you always know you wanted to meet Burton?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And we haven't met. I mean, this is okay. But COVID, I understand all that. We will share a glass of wine one day or whatever.
That is for sure.
And I'll meet that little darling, healthy baby, God willing. And
amen. Amen to that.
So, Steve, when I met Burton and we talked about like his spiritual journey, I said to him, now, Burton, how are you preparing yourself if, God forbid, this doesn't go well, that you don't have the outcome you want? And I thought he was so smart because he said, I've thought about that a lot. And I've just decided that, maybe I've helped this person say their goodbyes or got their affairs in order. Or if they had a child that, God, I get so emotional, that he was able to walk his daughter down the aisle. And, from that moment on, I was praying for you. Like, I don't want this to not happen for Burton because he's been so great about this and has really been thoughtful and, has given everything to saving someone's life. So now we're fast forwarding even longer and you're healthy and you get the news, that you're cured. How did it change your life? Like, what happened that you were able to do, that what have you been able to experience that you wouldn't have experienced if, God forbid, you had passed?
Oh, you mean things in my life?
Yes, like what, as Burton was saying, all the things that he just hoped if you didn't, what were you able to experience?
Well, I have a granddaughter
Oh.
It's my first grandchild. I have a granddaughter. My daughter and her husband had a healthy baby girl just this past November. She's just a smidge over 6 months old.
Oh.
So, you know, everything else pales in comparison to that. KU basketball had a good season this year. Unfortunately, the Chiefs, not the Ravens, won the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, you can have this year, Steve. You can have this year. We'll take next.
Okay. But those things all pale. Granddaughter, and if anybody has grandchildren, it's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But it's daily. Thanks. I am very grateful to daily to be alive. I mean, it's a cool thing.
Yeah.
That's
I've
awesome.
had this conversation with more Michelle than Eric, but Eric has participated too. And I said to Michelle, you hear people who survive something traumatic, whether it's something like this or, a horrific car accident. And they say after, oh, it changed my life. And these are the things, I quit my job, or I married somebody that I didn't think I would marry because it brought it into perspective, or whatever. They do major life changes. So I said, is that what happened to you? And she said, no. She goes, I guess if I had been unhappy, but I was happy in my job, and they were terrific when, during this whole time they supported me. And I went back to my job, and, I still had a wonderful family, and I had a great network of friends and a wonderful community. She goes, major things didn't change. She goes, maybe if I had been unhappy, they would have changed. But I have learned not to sweat the small stuff. Mm-hmm. Those things don't matter to me anymore. The minor irritations that maybe I would blow up about, don't.
Well, good for her. I'm not that. I'm not that gracious, perhaps. Yeah. I did come to appreciate at the moment things, after 50 days in the hospital or 100 days in the hospital, or whatever it was, just being in your own bed. Yeah. And a hospital bed is a cool thing that you put your arm out and it doesn't go off the bed. I mean, so those, and getting back to normal. You just want to get back. And I'm not back yet. Right after the transplant, by the time I got home, I could, with a lot of effort, lift a 2-pound weight. To get up the stairs, I'd have to get down on all fours and crawl up the stairs. I mean, they kick your butt. I mean, that's how this whole thing works. I got on the treadmill for, 4 minutes at a 30-minute mile. I think that for me, two things. One is that I came to the point in my life, which I wasn't at before, where I not only appreciated, but wanted help from others. I can do it by myself. I don't need anybody's help. And I couldn't have gotten through this without help of a lot of people, my wife being the number one person, but appreciative of that help and wanting somebody else's help. And, Burton, I mean, we can say it all we want, and we can throw these words out, but I wouldn't be here right now if you didn't do this, if you hadn't just taken the chance. And, Eric says, hey, and it's just amazing to me that you put this Q-tip in your mouth, and I wouldn't be here if that hadn't happened. So those were big things. And the biggest thing I learned was from one of my doctors. And she sat me down before I left the hospital the last time. This is after the transplant. And she said, a lot of stuff's going to happen. A lot of bad stuff's going to happen in the next year or couple of years, including you may not make it. But all that stuff, that's our job. All that medical stuff, we've got that. We've got your back. You have a job, Steve, and it's not to look over your shoulder. You got to go forward and don't worry about all the bad stuff, because it's going to happen, and it's going to happen over and over and over again, and you'll have all these setbacks. That's what we're here for. You just go forward, and you can't look over your shoulder worrying about what could happen. And I just kept that mantra in my head, and
that's
just
great.
going forward. So I still am in that recovery process.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you both. As I said, I didn't get through this unscathed with tears, but they're such happy tears, because my perspective as a staff person is, a little different, and not this just makes it all worth it for us. We're very committed to what we do, but then when we get to see all phases, and that we've in some small way facilitated helping to save a life, all the setbacks at work with, not getting the grant we've worked on, or, the event not going our way, or getting turned down to host a bone marrow drive somewhere. This makes it all worth it. And I can't thank you both enough for agreeing to participate in this. And, and of course, Burton, you're our ultimate hero for stepping up and, saving Steve's life.
It really has been a profound honor. Really, Steve, it's hard to figure out the words. I'm not one to be speechless, but I just feel so honored I had the opportunity to do this for you. And
thank you.
I feel lucky. I feel like I've got a lifelong friend in you now.
Amen. I agree 100%.
Okay. So thank you again, and have a great day. You've made mine.
Thank you.